Good evening, everybody. We left off on page 279. The black luxury car slid gracefully into the parking lot several stores down, and parked far away from the store. The tinted window rolled down slowly, and the barrel of an EK-15, a sniper energy weapon, peeked out, barely noticeable. No one turned their heads. No one cared, since everyone was just minding his own business. "I've got a clear shot at all four," he said into the radio, training his scope onto the red-haired man, the two children, and the patrol officer walking inside. "Wait," the reply came. "I'm looking at you on satellite and the weather report says strong gusts of wind in the next minute, lasting for the next 5 minutes. You'll miss. Wait till they exit. Only take the shot if you can get away. If not, send your backup. I'll be sending you regular weather reports." He nodded to his companion, in the seat beside him. His companion nodded back. "Understood," he said. Scene change. They went to the pasta aisle and started collecting what they needed. "Okay, this stuff looks good. Are either of you allergic to anything? Food, I mean?" Neil asked them. The boys shook their heads. "We have spaghetti all the time." "Perfect," Neil said, sticking 3 different kinds of noodles in the basket. "Butter. That was something else you were all out of." "Butter's over there," Officer Reed offered, pointing to the back wall of the store. "Off we go then," Neil said with a smile. Aiden and Patrick seemed a bit uneasy. Neil guessed that when they went grocery shopping, it was usually with Connor. He wasn't sure whether Aiden normally insisted on touching every price tag shoulder level with him as they walked down the aisles, or whether this was simply because he was nervous. Either way, it was starting to get on his nerves. If Aiden missed one, they had to stop and wait for him to go back and touch it. They finally got to the back wall and looked at the brands of butter in the industrial-sized pod. Reed looked at Neil. "Want to just get the generic stuff?" "Oh, look how cute!" An old woman walked up to them, looking at Aiden and Patrick. She had to be at least 90 years old. "I just love to see boys out shopping together," she said to Neil with a smile. She had curly white hair and glasses, and was wearing a jogging suit and carrying a pack of sugar. She smiled at Aiden and Patrick. Neil smiled back at her courteously. "I'm sure you two are very happy together," the woman said, looking at Officer Reed and Neil with a cheerful smile. Then she patted Aiden on the head and walked away. Reed and Neil looked at each other and grimaced. Aiden smoothed his hair down and thanked his lucky stars that she didn't kiss him or pinch him on the cheeks. "Are we done here?" Reed asked in a complaining tone. "Just about, I hope," Neil said. "What else do we need?" "Microfood," Reed said. "Lots and lots of microfood. How long till your parents get here again?" "This afternoon. Don't worry, my mum will buy this store 3 times over cooking for us. But we should arm ourselves just in case they're delayed." He pushed the cart to the micro-food aisle and began shoving a considerable amount of micro-pasta, micro-hot dogs, micro-hamburgers, micro-mac and cheese, and micro-fries into the basket. "We should get an apple too," he said with a broad smile. "Healthy eating and all." Reed chuckled. They went to the fruit aisle and picked up a couple of apples. "That should do it," Neil said. "Check out," Reed said, and turned around. "That way." They moved quickly to the checkout aisle, and Neil paid with his credit card. They were about to leave when Neil turned his head and saw something he didn't like. He turned to Reed and said quietly so the kids couldn't hear, "Take the basket and get them to the car. Exit the back way. We'll meet at the car." Reed looked suspiciously at Neil and followed Neil's line of sight. He saw it too, and nodded. "I'm supposed to stay with the 3 of you, not just them. You're gonna have to trust me on this one." They locked eyes for a moment, each man determined to do what he believed was right. Aiden and Patrick looked at each other and up at the adults. Something was wrong. They weren't speaking loud enough to really be heard through all this noise in the grocery store, but something was definitely wrong. Reed nodded slowly. "Okay, but if you aren't there in 3 minutes, I'm calling it in." "Call it in anyway," Neil said, and they departed. Neil went directly to aisle 13 and was out of sight as soon as the suspicious man came into the store. Wearing a long, thick coat in warm weather, and walking like a trained individual, Neil was not willing to bet he was simply an off-duty cop with no fashion sense. Officer Reed quietly took the kids and the basket to the back entrance of the store and exited out the sliding doors. "You push, Patrick," he said, and kept his hand on his service weapon and the kids very close. They headed for the car. Scene change. They split up. "I've still got a shot on the officer and the kids. The brother's still inside." "Damn," came the reply. "Weather's still not right. How close are they?" "They're almost at the car. They've seen us. The officer's covering the kids. He's moving fast. He left the basket outside. They're in the car, waiting for the brother. The officer's positioned himself so he's got a clear view of us." "Damn," the voice repeated. "We'll take what we can get. Have your guy carry out his orders from inside. You drive away." "Leave him?" "He can find his way home." "And the officer and the kids?" "Leave it for now. We'll get them later." "Understood." The black luxury car's window slid up, and they glided out of the parking lot. Scene change. "What's going on?" Patrick asked, his voice very afraid. "It's okay," Officer Reed said slowly, watching the car drive away. "I think it's okay now." He looked at his watch, then switched his radio on. "This is Officer Dwayne Reed. Dispatch, do you copy?" "We read you, officer," the reply came through his earpiece. "Requesting backup to coordinates 716-889-2. "We've got your coordinates, officer. Sending 2 squad cars to the location." "Thank you," he said. He turned the radio off and looked back at the kids. "Don't worry, guys. Everything's just fine." They didn't believe him, and they both buckled their seatbelts. Reed decided to unload the groceries later. For now, he kept his eyes peeled for activity, wishing he could go in to back up Neil. Scene change. Neil headed right through aisle 13. He remembered that the security office was in the back of the aisle, and he knew that was his best bet at the moment. He didn't carry a gun on regular basis anymore, not since he left the EU Navy officially. Unofficially, he had some experience with these kinds of situations, and recognized a few things about the suspicious-looking man he had seen enter the parking lot. One was that he was dressed in all black and appeared to have a gun strapped to his thigh. Neil saw the way he walked, and then noticed the strap and when his winter coat flapped in the wind. The other thing he noticed was that the man had his hand in the pocket of his unusually baggy jacket. He guessed that he was armed with more than one weapon, and the one he was about to reach for was the one he would use first. He was here for Neil, and probably the children too, and Neil couldn't let him have what he wanted. He knocked furiously on the security office door. "Open up!" he yelled, looking behind him. The man had entered the store, and Neil moved over a bit to obscure the man's view of him. He was now blocked by a rather large shelf filled with potato chips. "What do you want?" the security officer said gruffly, clearly annoyed as he opened the door and stared at Neil. "Well?" Neil pushed him inside and closed the door silently. "There's a gunman who just entered the store. Call in for backup and stay quiet. He's a trained assassin. He's here for me." The man stared at him. Then he laughed. "You're joking, right?" Neil looked behind him. He had lost sight of the man, not a good thing at all. He turned back to the security guard. "Listen to me," he said severely, pulling out his wallet. He was only supposed to do this in extreme circumstances. Neil thought this counted as extreme. He yanked his ID out. "My name's Neil Dunnigan, EU Navy Special Forces. Call for backup and give me your weapon." The security guard's eyes widened. He handed Neil the gun. "Thank you. Stay here. I'll bring it back. Here's some collateral." He tossed the man his wallet and ID and opened the blinds to the security office. The nice thing about these windows was that they were composed of a two-way mirror. It kept curious children from looking into the security office, but allowed the guard to look out occasionally while he sat in silence and played Tetris. Neil saw that his path was clear, and he exited the security office as quickly and quietly as he could. He stealthily moved over to the nearest aisle and took cover. People started to freeze in fear. "Get down," he told them quietly. "Either leave or get down," he hissed and pointed firmly at the linoleum floor. He didn't have his ID, so they probably thought he was attempting to rob the grocery store. But that didn't change how fast they ran away from him. If anything, they ran faster, abandoning their shopping carts and gathering their children as they headed for the exit. There are still far too many civilians in here, Neil thought. He didn't want anyone to get caught in the crossfire, and he knew that the assassin wouldn't stop at anything to find him. He moved again, quickly and quietly, in the direction he saw the assassin move. He held the gun in a practiced stance, his body relaxed and perfectly poised as it always was when he was about to do something like this. He caught sight of the man. By now, people were scrambling out of the store. Children were squealing, very scared since their parents were frightened. It made the situation all the more dangerous. Now Neil might accidentally clip one of them when he took out the assassin. The assassin noticed Neil as well, his target. In one swift motion, he took out his gun, and Neil saw that neither of them had a clear shot. He dove behind an aisle, quickly scrambling up. He couldn't allow the man to shoot civilians because they were in the way. The screams around him escalated. The people had seen the man's gun and Neil's gun and now were convinced that they were going to die. Many dropped to the floor instead of trying to get to the door. Neil thought that was better. Now those people wouldn't get shot unless the assassin was simply bloodthirsty. Neil ran for the next aisle. He had to get to a less populated area. A shot rang out and impacted the tile beside Neil. He ducked into an aisle and trained his weapon on the direction he guessed the assassin came from. He couldn't see the man's shadow, and he moved into a position that would make it harder for him to get shot. He imagined the assassin did the same thing. He would have to aim for the guy's gun, or he'd just keep shooting. The man was trained to shoot until he died, and he doubted he'd have a clear shot at his head from this angle, not with this damn rack of toothbrushes in the way. Neil relaxed his breathing and waited. He would let the assassin make the first move, and then he'd have the advantage. The man couldn't see the rack of toothbrushes from this angle. The assassin moved. His gun was visible. In a series of lightning-fast reactions, Neil jumped out, shot the man's gun out of his hand, and before he could reach for his backup gun, he shot him again. Though the man staggered, he continued reaching for his backup. Neil couldn't get a good shot in. He was too close, and it'd be a through and through. He might hit one of those panicking people. He placed a well-aimed kick at the man's stomach and another one at his head, and once he was down, he put his foot on the guy's hand and trained his gun on the man's head. "Don't move," he instructed. But the man was incredibly fast. He had his knife out in the blink of an eye, and Neil shot the man's active hand defensively before the assassin could stab him in the leg. The man screamed in pain as his hand was ripped apart, and Neil moved the gun smoothly back to the man's head. "Shut up. Don't move," he said firmly. "Drop your weapon," Neil heard a voice say from behind him. "Secure this man and I will. Promise. My name's Neil Dunnigan, EU Navy Special Forces." There was a pause, and Neil heard footsteps approaching him. 2 officers surrounded the assassin, guns trained on the man's head, while a third approached the man, facing Neil. Neil retracted his foot slowly from the man's wrist, and the 3rd officer pulled him to his feet and put handcuffs on him. The man cringed in pain and natural tears ran down his cheeks. He could barely stand at this point. Neil raised his weapon, flipped it in his hand expertly to grip the slide, and then set it down carefully on the ground. When he rose slowly with his hands raised and turned around to see Lieutenant Tillman and a woman he recognized as one of Kiri's CSIs standing with guns pointed at him. But Tillman lowered his weapon when he saw that Neil wasn't about to harm anyone innocent, and he said, "Kiri's children are safe with Officer Reed in the rental car outside. Want to tell us what happened here?" The police were now leading people out of the store, and Neil lowered his hands. He wasn't going to be arrested, and that was a plus. He began telling Tillman exactly what happened. He noticed the security guard approaching. "Mr. Dunnigan, would you like this back?" He handed Neil his ID and wallet. "Thanks," Neil said, and put it in his back pocket. "Kiri never told us you were in the Special Forces," said the CSI. Neil read Detective Nikki McAllister on her ID. "I never told Kiri I was in the Special Forces. And I'm technically not, so this doesn't get onto the news, all right?" Tillman nodded. "I understand. Are you a full-time operative? Are you on a mission right now?" "No. Officially, I'm a full-time engineer with the European Space Agency." "We'll keep it confidential," Nikki said. "Right. Do I need to fill out an incident report or be interrogated or anything?" "You'll need to fill out a bit of paperwork and write a statement, but you didn't kill anyone and the shots you fired were clearly in self-defense. This will never go to trial. You've got to get the security guard to sign a non-disclosure agreement." Nikki nodded. "I'll go talk to the guard." Tillman nodded, and Nikki walked away to find the wandering security guard. Tillman turned back to Neil. "Kiri's going to want to hear about this." "I know. I'll tell her. The kids are in the car?" "Yeah, they're outside. They want to know that you're okay." "I'll go let them know. Do you want me down at the station now? Because I've got to pick up my parents from the airport in 3 hours, he said, looking at his watch. Tillman chuckled. Neil wasn't even the least bit fazed. "We'll do the debrief at Kiri's house, and we can have you in and out in less than 3 under these circumstances. But we're not going to let you go to the airport, especially not with the kids. We'd like you to go straight back to Kiri's house." We'll set up a high-security perimeter and have inside and outside surveillance. Neil frowned. The kids can go back with Officer Reed, but I want to meet my parents at the airport. Tillman looked at Neil. After what happened here, I just can't let that happen. Neil sighed and understood the man's point of view, even if he didn't like it. He nodded. All right. I don't think there's much of a crime scene to investigate here, but if you need to, meet us at Curie's house in a few minutes. Nikki and I will leave the police to clean up and secure the area. They'll have to ask for a few witness reports and things of that nature, but they'll be done pretty quickly too. I'll see you at Curie's house. Neil nodded and left the store. He noticed that a police officer was following him. He headed for the rental car to where Aiden and Patrick were standing with Officer Reed and a few other officers. The children looked extremely scared. Hey guys, I'm sorry about that, he said immediately. Are you okay? Patrick asked. What's going on? Aiden demanded. I'm fine, and we had a bit of a mix-up in there. Everyone's fine, he reassured them. He pulled them both into a hug. What happened? Patrick asked. Everyone just ran out of the store and we heard banging. They were all really scared. I know. I took care of it. Don't worry about it, he told them. But they were too curious to let it rest at that. Tell us what happened, Aiden demanded. We want to know. Neil sighed. He looked at Officer Reed. Did you say anything? Didn't breathe a word, Reed said. You sure you're okay? I'm fine, he said, getting a bit annoyed now. He looked down at the kids. Okay, you want to know what happened? Someone bad came into the grocery store, and we wanted to protect you guys. So Officer Reed took you to the car, and I stopped the bad person. Did you hurt him? Patrick asked. I had to, Neil said, trying to make his voice sound less edgy. He was still revved up on adrenaline. But I didn't get hurt, and we're taking the bad person to jail, and I need to go fill out a bunch of paperwork about what happened, but we can do it at the house. Grandma and Grandpa will meet us later on, okay? They nodded their agreement uneasily. Okay, Neil said, and was surprised when the kids hugged him suddenly. He smiled down at them and hugged them back. We're all okay. Nothing to worry about. Let's go back in the squad car, Reed suggested. It was bulletproof, and he didn't want to take any chances. Neil shrugged. I'll drive the rental back. You can take the kids. We'll have someone bring the rental back. We stay together, Reed insisted, and didn't wait for an argument. All right, Neil said to the kids and pointed at the grocery cart. Let's load up the squad car with the groceries. The kids jumped to action, thankful to have something to do. We'll read more tomorrow.